I'll start here for a few minutes and then I'll get up. So I'm going to do the introduction. We were told on Sunday morning when we did a tour of town that the Paulistas claim that when the karaoke start working, the Christ that's like this will start to do this. So I actually thought when I heard that what it really meant is that the Paulistas are like this and the karaokes are like that. But I should add that I'm a Montrealer and we have exactly the same relationship with Toronto, including the business being there and the money being there and the fun being in Montreal. But I want to make a request in the spirit of this. Maybe we'll introduce a new tradition here, that at the end of the talk, if you like the talk, please do not clap. Like karaokes do this instead of clapping, because it's the Paulistas who will clap and the karaokes should do this. So that's a small request when we finish. I told Alex I was speaking at the BNDES Bank a few minutes ago, and I said, they didn't clap at the end, and he looked at me, and I said, yeah, and I was really happy, because I asked the same thing, and they... Okay, so let me outline briefly what I'm going to do, and then I'll walk around and do it. I want to make several points. The first point I want to make is that the world is in a big mess, although maybe you don't need to be told that. And I want to make the point that the mess is a management mess. It's not an economic mess. It's a management mess. We've made some terrible mistakes in management, and I think we need to, as Paula said, we need to get rid of some bad habits, and I'll talk about some of those. Management, I think, is off track. Conventional views of management are off track, and we need another view, and that other view, it seems to me, is based in the sense of community, and it's based in a sense of building up in social initiatives and corporate initiatives that build from the ground up and not from this so-called top down. I have no idea what this top is anyway, other than a chart that puts the top person on top. You know, we have top management and we have middle management. How come we never have bottom management? If we have top management and middle management, then surely the other people know their bottom management. But the fact that we don't say bottom management means we should stop saying top management. And then the next thing I want to say is that these kind of social initiatives and this approach to management is actually very much in the spirit of Brazil. This is the right place to talk about these things. I did a paper with a person some of you may know named Guy Asvero, who is a carioca and just finished his doctorate at McGill, and we did a paper on why not social initiatives. We decided that Brazilians in general are a why not people. There are why people and there are why not people. The why people say, why should we do this? Why should we bother? The why not people say, sure, why not? Yeah, why not? Instead of why. At least the carioca, and presumably a lot of Brazilians are why not people. And then I want to tell you something about the program that Alex mentioned, the International Masters in Practicing Management, IMPM, tell you why it's here and tell you why it's compatible with the why not mentality, and why your president is looking for a model. She doesn't have one, she's looking for one, and I'm going to tell you why I think what we're doing in this classroom and why we're here presents an alternative to the development, the sort of massive development of managers in Brazil. And two of the members of the CAF, Kathleen and Peter, will come up and tell you what the class has developed as to what form that could look in Brazil. And then I'll throw out a challenge to your president's challenge about an initiative, social initiative that she might take and you might take to develop management. Okay, I'm going to focus mostly on these two models of management, and in Paulo's terms, the one where I think we need to get rid of, and the one I think we need to embrace. And then I'll talk about the IMPM philosophy. So I'll walk around a bit. I don't know how I'm going to juggle 3 different things in my hands, but all I need is a third hand, and I'll be all set. So, but until that happened, I forgot. I thought I only had 2 things, and then I realized I have 3 things. So this is the title. The problems we're facing now, I think, are threats from without and threats from within, or if you like, environmental degradation and personal degradation. I don't have to dwell on these problems. There are problems with global warming, there are problems with nuclear war, poverty, pollution are all kind of external problems, any one of which could destroy us. And within, we absorb all these chemicals in so many ways that cancers are on the way up and all these other things, so that we face serious threats. And the question is, who's going to address those threats? If you think governments are going to address those threats, then please go back and visit what happened in Copenhagen in 2009, when all the great powers got together to discuss global warming. And the conclusion, in the words of a British minister, is we put numbers on the table. Thank you very much. We're really in good shape. As long as there are numbers on the table, we won't have any more global warming, I guess. Meantime, while this was going on in the Great Hall of Copenhagen, all around Denmark is one of the great social initiatives of the world, which is probably the most advanced use of alternate energy of any country, particularly wind, but all kinds of things. And it's an initiative that involves government, it involves business, but it especially involves the social sector, or the plural sector, I like to call, to go along with the public and the private sector, namely organizations, NGOs, and not-for-profits, and all those organizations that are neither public nor private, that are very prominent and totally forgotten in the political process. When your president talked about this initiative to develop management, she talked about the public and the private sector. She said nothing about the social sector, nothing about the plural sector. And yet the plural sector is key not only to that kind of a social initiative, but when you start to study interesting social initiatives, you find that the plural sector is where a lot of this starts. And if we look at one of the things that fascinates me about this country is that you have an extremely active plural sector with all kinds of social initiatives. The most interesting, in a way, was the way this country dealt with HIV/AIDS, the ethanol issue, the Bossa Familia. Some of these are more government driven. Some of these are rather strongly business driven, but many of them are driven by the social sector, the sector in between the two. So I don't think government has been too co-opted in a way by big business. Or a lot of governments in the world are paralyzed by this split between left and right. And they're able to do less and less in a way, which of course is convenient for large global companies that want governments to do as little as possible. And the great international agencies that should be monitoring those large corporations are cheerleaders for those corporations. And every single major international agency, without exception, the really powerful ones, are all economic. The World Trade Organization, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the Organization for Economic Cooperation, and so on and so forth, are all economic agencies. And so rather than looking for some kind of balance in society, we're swinging totally in one direction. America was noble at the end of World War II, and the Marshall Plan was a fantastic initiative on the part of the American government. We haven't been seeing so much of noble America since. Noble America will not solve the world's problems. It contributes to a huge number of world problems, including global warming and lots else. Will corporate social responsibility, so-called, solve the problem? I applaud corporate social responsibility. I like to see as much of it as possible. But if you think a green Walmart is going to make up for a greedy Exxon or a greedy BP, you're kidding yourself. Businesses should do as much as they can, but there's too many problems caused in business in a certain way. This win-win idea of Adam Smith's invisible hand is no longer applying the way it does. Whoops. So let me talk a little bit about, as I said earlier, the crisis, particularly in the United States, is not an economic crisis or not a financial crisis, at least not in its roots. It's a management crisis. It's a crisis of mismanagement. Just think about all those big banks and insurance companies that were buying mortgages that any kind of investigation would have shown to be junk. Any kind of study would have shown that they were betting their whole companies on absolute junk. This is just a question of mismanagement. Just a question of mismanagement. The senior managers didn't know, or maybe they didn't care because they were trying to run with profits, and the middle managers either didn't know or they knew and couldn't convey it to the senior managers. This is a case of mismanagement. But it goes far beyond those companies. Any company that downsized, which is a polite word for saying firing thousands of workers at the drop of a share price because they didn't meet their profit levels even though they remained profitable. Any ones that fire people in huge numbers is an irresponsible company. They're irresponsible to their shareholders as well, because what kind of a company do you leave behind when people are in mortal fear of being fired, even though they're doing their job, and somehow a week before the financials came out they were needed, and a week after the financials came out they could suddenly be fired in great numbers? What kind of a company does this? Like, were they redundant before, in which case the people were mismanaging, they should have gotten rid of them before, or were they still necessary after, and the productivity was built on the backs of the people left behind? America is described as being very productive, but there's two ways to be productive. One is to be truly better, and the other is to do it on the backs of your workers, in a sense, by squeezing them more and more to get more and more out of them. I think a lot of this famed productivity in the United States, certainly not all of it, is the latter. There are companies that explore. There are why not companies, and there are companies that exploit. There are why companies. They take advantage of what they can. Apple and Google are wonderful explorers. I think some other companies, maybe Microsoft, lots of others, a lot of the pharmaceutical companies that are buying their molecules rather than developing them are not explorers anymore. They're exploiters. And America built up by being an exploring company. It was the ultimate why not country. And now it's becoming more of a why country, and Brazil is the why not country right now. And it's an exciting place. So this is the kind of model we live with. Companies are collections of human resources. Are you a human resource? I'm a human being. I'm not a human resource. This kind of vocabulary demeans people. People. Demeans human beings. To call people human resources is to say they're resources like other resources and we get rid of them when we don't need them. I'm not a human resource. Downsizing at the drop of a share price. Leadership separate from management. This is one of my favorite things. Do you want to be managed by someone who doesn't lead? Do you want to be managed by someone who has no leadership capabilities? Certainly not. Well, how about being led by somebody who has no management interests, no management capabilities? They don't know what's going on. Management is what tells you what's going on. Management is on the ground. Leadership's up in the air. So you can't separate leaders from managers. And when people strut around saying, I'm a great leader, they're probably rotten managers. And they're dangerous to their organizations. Organizations as systems of control. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Have you heard that? Well, whoever measured measurement? Whoever assessed? Whoever did a study of measurement? Whoever measured the performance of measurement? And if you don't measure measurement, then I guess you can't manage measurement, therefore you should get rid of measurement. But that's as silly as saying that you should get rid of everything you can't measure. You can't measure culture. You can't measure leadership. You can't measure what you expect of a new product. Who's ever got it right about new products, trying to measure the market for a new product? You know, Apple came out with the iPhone. They never dreamed it would do as well as it did. BlackBerry, to take a Toronto example, or at least an unfortunate Canadian example, came out with the
I can't even remember the name. I forget what it's called. It was a disaster. So who can tell what products are going to do? Decision making is thinking. It's all about thinking. It's all in the head. Strategy is planning from the top. I don't know any company that ever developed a strategy in a formal process. Let me, if I can convince this machine to do. Let me give you an alternate model. So, Paulo, that's the one to get rid of.
Get rid of, yes.
Simple. Now that we know what it is, we just simply get rid of it. And we bring on the new model. Now, this is just another perspective. It's another way of thinking about things. I think it's much more compatible with what I know about Brazil. It's built in community, people being personally committed, collective engagement, that people are in it together, they work together, the way this country worked together to deal with the HIV/AIDS crisis. You trust people so they trust you back. Organizations trust people, they don't fire them casually. And so people trust the organization. The company is a community of human beings instead of a collection of human resources. The organization is about cooperation and exploration. It's about people working together. Managers lead, leaders manage. Decision making is as much about seeing and doing as it is about thinking. How many of you chose your spouse through a thinking process? You know, who are all the alternatives, and you know, if it's a man looking at a woman, how beautiful is she, and how smart is she, and will she raise my children, and can she cook, and all these sorts of things. You make a list, you put numbers next to all of them, you do an assessment, and you decide who you're going to marry. By that time, she's already married to somebody else. As opposed to seeing first. My father was living in New York, and he called my grandmother, and he said, "Today I met the woman I'm going to marry." Not a lot of analysis or thinking in that decision, the most important decision of his life and probably the best. So it worked out well and he had it right. Or doing, you know, a very effective way of making a lot of decisions is not to think and then do, but to do and then think. You don't know what to do, so you do something, try something. And it works or it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, try something else and keep trying until something works. Then think about it. So thinking, doing, drives thinking as much as thinking drives doing. So this other model says we focus on seeing first, we focus on doing first, and not just always on thinking. I won't go into the implications of doing first for picking a spouse. You can work that out for yourself. You can figure that one out for yourself. Strategy is learning, not as planning, but as learning. The interesting strategies come out of a learning process. I'll give you one example. You don't have the company here, but some of you know it. IKEA, I think, is the largest furniture company in the world by far. When you go into IKEA, you buy the furniture unassembled in a box so that you can get it in your car and take it home yourself. That came about not because a chief executive or a senior manager had a clever idea in an office. Those ideas don't come from offices. But because a worker tried to put a table in his car and he couldn't get it in, so he took off the legs. And somebody said, if we have to take the legs off, maybe our customers do too. That became the heart and soul of IKEA's strategy. Strategies, many of the most interesting strategies grow up from the ground, or they grow from people who are on the ground. Like Steve Jobs was on the ground and knew what was going on and was using these things and had all kinds of ideas about them. So strategies don't come from formal processes. So this is one model, this is another model. So let me just mention about social initiatives. I'm talking about social initiatives here, but I could be talking about company initiatives. The story of the IKEA table is a company initiative. But a lot of change comes about when people get together in communities and drive change. And here's a bunch of examples. The Red Cross itself came out of Switzerland. Came out of a person who felt that the people injured in war were not being properly looked after. Doctors Without Borders, another example of a social initiative that spread around the world. Grameen Bank, you all know, about a business, in effect a business initiative that led to microfinancing and has changed enormous parts of the world. An initiative that spread all over the world. Wind power in Denmark. I mentioned the Green Belt movement in Kenya to plant billions of trees around the world. The HIV/AIDS crisis in Brazil and how it was dealt with by ethanol effort in Brazil. A couple of examples from Brazil, but there's so many interesting examples in Brazil. I think because this country is a kind of why not country. So I'm going to talk about our social initiative briefly to reclaim our corporate cultures, and then I want to talk about your social initiative, or at least your president's social initiative, which is to build up the sense of management in the country. I call this last generation management development. These are pictures taken off the Harvard Business School website some years ago. I call it getting the Harvard finger. If you know what getting the finger means, use your imagination. And you'll notice the professors in focus, and you can see that the people behind are managers. They're not junior people, they're managers. These are management programs, but they're out of focus. And the professor's in focus because, after all, teaching is about the professor speaking. It's about getting information from the professor's notebook, that's my notebook, to the learner's notebook without going through the mind of either. So that's one model. Our model, this is our model of management education. These are three managers sitting around a table. One's from the US, a couple from Canada, others from other countries all around the other tables. And they're sitting there, and they're sharing their experience. They're talking about what they know in their experience. Our classrooms are not designed like this. Our classrooms, and we have one upstairs, or downstairs, wherever we are, downstairs, upstairs.
Well,
anyway, in the building. In the building.
Upstairs.
Yeah. Our model is a flat room with round tables and managers sitting in groups of about 4, 5, 6. And we drop in our pearls of wisdom, we drop in our nice concepts, but the managers run with them on their own, based on their own experience. And they bring their experience to bear. And our rule is about half the time is devoted to them learning from each other based on their experience, not our experience. It's a very different model. And the interesting thing is, so we built the program called the International Masters in Practicing Management. We built that program 15 years ago. We run it in 5 different countries. It's only for managers. They come for about 10 days at a time, 4 times over the course of a year and a half. So they stay on their jobs, and they go back and forth between their jobs and the company and the classroom. So the work is fresh. They carry their learning back from the classroom into their work, and they apply it with groups that some of them form at work to carry their learning into their own companies. We've got about 20 people from the class sitting here in the room tonight. We developed this in 5 countries around the world, and this year we decided to move one of the modules to Brazil and to Rio. Because of all the things I talked about. Brazil is a why not country. This is a country that's open to new ideas. This is an exciting country. Things are happening here. There's a lot of excitement about what's happening here, and that's why we're here. So managers develop best by reflecting on their own experience and sharing their insight with their colleagues. Then they carry that learning back to the workplace for impact. I mentioned 2 of the programs. One of the programs, the IMPM, there's a healthcare version of the program where healthcare managers come in. And then there's a very interesting other program that was developed by a manager who actually did the IMPM program, but he came up with this idea before. And that is, he said, oh, you got a bunch of interesting ideas here, but I can't afford to send my people off. I don't have any budget. I can't afford to send my managers off to that program, so I'm going to bring your program down into my workplace. And he basically did what we do. He sat his managers at a round table in a room. They met every couple of weeks. They shared their experience. They learned from their experience. They used some of the teaching materials from our program. And the managers in that group started to create their own group. It was like Amway, or I guess maybe Natura's like that. I don't know. But started to share their things and started to develop their own groups, and it led to a whole bunch of groups. And we looked at this and we said, this is exciting. We should be doing this on a large basis. So we developed an organization called coachingourselves.com, which has a Brazilian If you go on the thing and click on the Brazil flag, you can see that. So this is my, let me go back. By the way, this is Carlos. Carlos went to one of our programs, and then he went home and he sent us this picture. And he said, when I have a problem in the factory now, he runs the factory in Mexico City, he said, when I have a problem in the factory, I get everybody around the table and we reflect with each other on the problem. So he carried the stuff we're doing in the classroom straight into his own office. Your social initiative, let me say a word about Brazil and your social initiative, which is your president's initiative, which is how do you enhance and build up management capabilities. Obviously, what I'm leading to is don't copy standard practice. The easiest thing to do is to bring down all the famous professors from the States or whatever and do what they're doing. And I don't think it's working very well in the States. I think you have to work it out in your own way. That's the challenge to your president. There's three characteristics of this country that Guy and I wrote up in the paper we did on Why Not Social Initiatives. There's a peaceful pride in Brazil. You're an interesting country. You're big, so you're confident and you're powerful, and yet you have no disputed borders or no border wars, or you haven't had border wars in an awfully long time. So you don't have that problem to worry about. You've got an inherent confidence in the country. You're isolated in the sense that you speak a language that nobody else quite speaks in South America, and in fact in the whole world, other than Portugal, not a lot of people are speaking your language. You're the center of that language, so you're kind of on your own in certain ways. There's a unified eclecticism in the sense that you've got all these divides, rich, poor, black, white, north, south, on and on, but you deal with them. That doesn't mean they're not problems, but you deal with them. There's a kind of unity in your variety, which is very good. And then there's a kind of connected humanism. There's Guy's comment was particularly that this is a country very influenced by its African immigrants, very focused on dance, on color, on joy, on gaiety, and those kinds of things. It's very connected to a kind of humanistic view. Well, that makes it a kind of nice for the challenge for your president, which is to develop management communities from the ground up and do it very much in the spirit of what Brazil truly is. Thank you.
Lots of people from São Paulo here. It's an issue of community because, yes, we have so many people here from São Paulo that we decide to engage with São Paulo as well in Rio. Anyway, we never know. So, anyway, thanks, Henry. Well, the model started, let's say, 8 years ago, wasn't it? The model here in Brazil. It's the 50th model of a sequence in which you had different countries. The first country was in UK, then the group of participants here, don't call them students, but the participants here, they went to Canada, then to India, then to China, and then finally they came to Brazil. The groups here, they are all here sitting with us. They are members of our community now. They are like our FGV students. I hope that you feel at home. That's your place here as well. So, having said that, one of the main features of the pedagogy of the IMPM is the user guide. The user guide is a kind of, let's say, a place in which each manager reviews all his or her learnings throughout the program and prepares this guide for an eventual successor. Anyway, so we started here 8 years ago with lots of help and lots of activities, not only within the classroom, but also outside the classroom with field work or field visits to important organizations here in Brazil, such as Petrobras, such as AMIL, Galpão Aplauso, BNDES, and Gerdau. And those guys were brave enough to learn a lot from Brazil. And we had the idea of, because of this social initiative from the president of the country, why not providing some of those learning or exchanging some of those learning from the IMPM to the Brazil as a society. So that was the challenge that we have been dealing with over those last 8 days here in the IMPM program, among other activities. And after hard work and some brilliant work with great help of some people such as Sergio Vanderlei, a doctoral student here, also from BNDES with Paulo Favere and Paulo Mota, I think that we had some, let's say, interesting ideas or suggestions or proposals that might be exchanged here by the members of the IMPM. So having said that, I'd like to invite Peter Neely. It's only Peter, is it? Okay, I'm going to invite Peter Neely to present some of those ideas. I like to welcome this brave man because it's always very difficult to come to a country and have some suggestions. But that's the challenge idea that we'd like to embrace, isn't it, Henry? Am I wrong on that? Challenge ideas, okay. Yeah. So anyway, I'd like to welcome this brave man or this brave group here represented by Peter.
Okay. Is the PowerPoints on?
I think they are.
Just while we're bringing the presentation up, I'd like to first of all thank you all for coming and allowing us into your beautiful country and city. We've had the opportunity over the last week and a half to learn, to see, to tour, and what we've done. I'm merely the speaker of a group of 20 students here from all over the world. And what we've been working on is a user guide of what we can take back to our companies about what we've learned in IMPM. And in doing that over the last few days, we thought about sharing some of that with you, and then we have a more inclusive user guide available for anyone who wishes to see it. What we've done, though, today in collaborating and reflecting on what we've learned while being in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, is we've talked about the knowledge that we've learned, and what we want to do is share that with you in an effort to contribute to a conversation. So if we think, what we came up as a class today about was Carnival as a metaphor for great management going forward. So if we think about the evolution of Carnival and the spirit of Carnival, this is one interpretation or one example of Carnival that goes on, as you know. The history of Carnival starting in the favelas and then being opened up to a wider community. The aspect that it's evolved into not just a social, but also the public as well as the private, working together, all three. So we have the plural, as Henry mentioned. We have the private, plural being coordination, public providing infrastructure, and private providing support. All three work in harmony to create something that's quite incredible for everyone to experience. It's that spirit, I guess, that we see a link to what we're learning in IMPM. And I'd like to share that from the group with you. When we look at the spirit of Carnival and the 5 management mindsets, what we've learned is that there is no one mindset for management. There is no one way. That by using a variety of mindsets, we learn a lot more. And so we learn through the reflective mindset, the introspective, looking inward for successes and failures and learning from them. And we see that in Carnival by the narrative that is told during Carnival, with the different cars and the different stories of spots of time, the history or a figure in the history of Brazil that's displayed. it's a reflective way to remember those spots of time. We look at the analytical mindset and we say, each year Carnival evolves. So it goes through an eco-cycle of creative destruction. What you did last year is different than what you did this year, and it's coordinated to build a new experience. We look at appreciative inquiry. So if you don't like the answer, ask different questions. So asking different questions and building on your strengths, not your weaknesses, gets you different solutions. The worldly mindset allows us to look through the lens of the worlds we live and work in, as well as the broader sense globally. But the worldly mindsets here are the different communities that participate, that come together as one. But what's important is that we must understand those worlds in which we live and work in to come together as one. When we do that, we have to collaborate. And the collaborative mindset allows ideas to foster up innovation. Ideas come from any time, any person, any place. And the idea is that it's a conversation to build, that one person can offer a certain amount of knowledge, 2 people, 3 people, but when it's a community talking, we have a collaborative discussion. We see that in Carnival with the public, plural, and private working together, discussing, collaborating how we can make Carnival amazing each year. And the last mindset is action, why not, which we've talked about quite a bit here in Rio as well as tonight. This why not attitude is refreshing to many of us in the program. You have everything to gain when you say why not. It's not, it's a positive statement. Why not? Why can't we do this? What if we could, and how can we do it? With that goes doing first. Instead of thinking through everything with the analytical mindset, it's a matter of doing first. Try it. If you fail, try again. Why not? Try it. So what we all felt was important here is that through Carnival, we actually see this working. And that can be expanded throughout Brazil as a way to foster management, the right type of management. So it's something that can be used to Brazil, but also from Brazil to the world. It's an excellent, excellent example of what can be done. What it does is it fosters innovation and productive societies. It builds on the 3 different Ps, the plural, private, and public. They work in tandem to create societies that are sustainable. Those sustainable societies are what we're trying to achieve, and that's something that we can learn from you, and you can share with the world. So that's a general summary of what we've been discussing over the last few days in our class. And again, we have a bigger user guide that we're happy to provide with a lot more detail about this. But this is really to add to the conversation. It's to provide you with our knowledge to enhance the conversation being done here in Brazil. Thank you very much.
Peter, may I ask you to